The recording begins on June 12th, 2015, mid-morning, at the Santiam Pass Trailhead, Central Oregon. The ranger log shows an entry timed at 10:47 a.m. E. Caldwell, solo hike, loop East Ridge. The ink trails off, the pen tip scratched with faint pressure. Grainy footage from the visitor center shows her adjusting the straps of a cobalt blue pack, tucking a grocery receipt for trail mix and water inside the side mesh pouch. Temperature reads 58 degrees, clear rising. Gravel compresses beneath her boots as sunlight cuts through the lodgepole pines. The moment holds nothing unusual. Ordinary motion, clean daylight, measured breath before exertion. When she glances at her GPS unit, reflection of white sky blinks across its screen. Unreadable. At the closing frame, she signs her initials again on the secondary permit sheet, pressing harder this time. The file notes it clinically. This was the last verified sighting of Elizabeth Ann Caldwell. By late morning of June 12th, 2015, Elizabeth Caldwell, 23, left her silver Subaru at the Santiam Pass parking area. She was a geology student from Corvallis, known for meticulous route planning. Investigators later found laminated map segments, compass bearings written in pencil grease pen on waterproof tabs. The weather was mild, winds under 8 miles per hour, visibility excellent. A receipt recovered from a nearby gas station timestamped 7:38 a.m. confirms her commute route east. The clerk, in subsequent statement, recalled, "Normal conversation, black coffee, no hurry." Her sister Hannah Caldwell remembers a short message sent at 9:42. "Signal good, I'll check in before dusk." That routine text later became timeline anchor for the missing person file. The forecast that weekend projected stable conditions, daytime temperatures in the low 60s, night cooling to mid-40s. Elizabeth had packed accordingly. Lightweight thermal layer, water-resistant shell, provisions for 3 days, though she'd planned only an overnight stay. Her previous hikes in the region demonstrated similar preparation. Friends described her as experienced but never reckless, according to statements collected during the third day of investigation. Ranger patrol notes indicate moderate traffic on the trail system that Friday. 27 signed entries, mainly day hikers and weekend backpackers. The Santiam Pass route splits at marker 12, offering either the established loop or access to secondary trails leading toward higher elevation. Elizabeth's permit indicated the standard route, a decision that later complicated search parameters. By nightfall, her vehicle remained in the parking area. The dashboard held a folded printout of weather conditions and emergency contact information, standard practice for solo hikers in the region. A laminated card tucked beneath the sun visor listed medical information, blood type, and allergies. Everything indicated a hiker who understood wilderness protocols. At midnight, her sister attempted contact. The message remained undelivered. Cell tower records later showed no connection attempts from Elizabeth's device after 3:17 p.m., a detail that would establish the first critical window in the timeline. Dawn revealed her car undisturbed, covered in light dew. The dashboard clock displayed the correct time. A park maintenance worker noted it during morning rounds but raised no alarm. Wilderness areas routinely hosted overnight stays. Only when Hannah filed a formal inquiry at the ranger station did the absence register as anomalous. The search coordinator's first log entry remains clinical. Solo female hiker, planned East Ridge loop, unreported since Friday evening check-in window. Initial assessment, possible trail deviation or minor injury causing delay. The more careful her preparation appeared, the more inexplicable her absence became. At dusk, no check-in arrived. Signal ceased exactly between waypoint E14 and E15. Saturday, June 13th. Cloud cover thin, barometric pressure steady. A family of 3 from Bend reported crossing paths with a young woman in pale windbreaker descending east slope at mid-afternoon. Their description matched Caldwell's clothing, in photos later released. Deputy Forest Ranger Aaron Kells documented the sighting at coordinates 44.35 latitude north, 121.89 longitude west, appended to field log 62. Individual appeared healthy, responsive, directional awareness intact. 2 miles beyond that logging zone, the path split. No subsequent witnesses were verified. Her boot prints, size 7 Vibram tread, faded in soft clay near the creek crossing. The sighting placed Elizabeth approximately 7 miles from the trailhead, progressing at normal pace. Ranger Kells noted ambient conditions at that location. Light breeze from northwest, creek running half capacity. No weather anomalies. When later interviewed, he recalled nothing distinctive about the encounter. Routine trail check. Hiker acknowledged safety reminder. The ordinariness of the interaction would later complicate timeline analysis. By Saturday evening, Elizabeth's intended route should have returned her to the Southern Trail junction, placing her 3 miles from the parking area. This point featured cellular reception, an established check-in location for hikers requiring assistance. No communication originated from this sector. Hannah Caldwell, increasingly concerned, contacted 3 of Elizabeth's hiking companions from previous excursions. None had received messages since Friday morning. One recalled a comment Elizabeth had made about investigating geological formations near the eastern ridge. Something about volcanic glass deposits worth photographing. This note redirected initial inquiries eastward away from the creek crossing where her trail presence ended. Forest Service regulations maintained a 24-hour waiting period before initiating formal search operations for experienced hikers. The protocol balanced resource allocation against frequent cases of delayed return. Hannah's call to the ranger station at 8:27 p.m. Saturday was logged as informational inquiry, not urgent response. Weather remained stable overnight, temperatures dropping to 43 degrees, uncomfortable but not life-threatening for a prepared hiker, the incident report noted. Subject equipped with appropriate gear for conditions. The waiting period passed. The desk log captures the transition with stark precision. Status upgrade, missing person, priority 2, coordinate with county resources. At daybreak Sunday, preliminary search patterns were mapped. The Ridge Trail system encompassed 48 miles of primary and secondary paths. Elizabeth's intended route crossed 14 mapped water features, 6 significant elevation changes, and 2 areas designated as communication dead zones. Disappearances rarely begin as vanishings, only as small deviations misread as intention. The boot impressions ended abruptly at the waterline. No continuation, no sign of return. When Hannah reached the ranger office by Sunday afternoon, it had been roughly 36 hours since last contact. Protocol dictated a 24-hour grace before formal activation of search resources. Sergeant Dina Morales from Lynn County initiated preliminary SAR preparation, grid assignment, cellular triangulation, weather projection for 72 hours. The audio log from dispatch captured signal last pinged East Ridge, no movement since Friday. Visibility deteriorated as Pacific moisture advanced across the ridgeline. The first ground search began at dawn Monday, involving 24 personnel and 2 canine units. Morning briefings established standard patterns. Contour following teams worked outward in expanding spirals from the last confirmed sighting, The technical coordinator issued tracking devices calibrated to Central Oregon's magnetic variation. Search personnel carried laminated terrain maps marked with 50-meter grid sections. "We're assuming she's responsive but immobile," Morales told the assembled teams. "Listen for whistles, watch for reflection signals." The assumption of survival drove initial operations, standard procedure for the first 72 hours. Her voice remained steady in the recording, clinical in its precision. Hannah remained at base camp, providing photographs and personal details. "She wears a silver chain with our grandmother's ring." The interview transcript reads, "It catches light. She never takes it off." Such identifying markers entered the search briefing materials, small details that might distinguish a person in wilderness terrain. Weather continued deteriorating. Radio traffic captured increasing static, position updates broken by atmospheric interference. By afternoon, visibility dropped to under 200 meters on higher elevations. Team leaders switched to compass bearings rather than visual landmarks. The incident command post established communications relay positions on exposed ridges. SAR protocols classified wilderness searches by complexity factors: terrain difficulty, weather conditions, subject experience, time elapsed. Elizabeth's case registered as moderate severe by Monday evening, the classification escalating with each passing hour. Field teams reported decreased trail definition due to precipitation, boot impressions dissolving in saturated soil. Ground searchers methodically documented natural barriers: creek crossings swollen by rainfall, steep embankments showing no traverse marks, deadfall zones that would impede normal hiking progress. Each elimination narrowed the probability map. Sector by sector, the search area both expanded in diameter and grew more precisely delineated. Hannah's journal, later submitted to the case file, records the progression of time with increasing tension. "They work with such calm. How can they be so calm when she's out there?" The professional demeanor of search personnel often contrasts sharply with family distress, a division of emotional labor captured in the incident documentation. The search coordinator's evening summary noted, "No responsive movement to aerial signals, no trail register signatures matching subject description at peripheral checkpoints. Recommend full operational commitment for day 3. At that stage, procedure felt like structure, measurable, rational. The unknown was still containable by coordinates. By the second afternoon, search dogs alerted, false positive, trail scent ended at Deadfall Gully. By June 15th, weather turned unsettled. Ranger communication logs recorded intermittent radio interference from atmospheric bands. Helicopter call sign Raven 2 executed aerial mapping of search sectors Delta through Gulf, producing thermal image overlays with no detectable heat signatures. Volunteers from Corvallis and Eugene joined trained personnel, expanding the area radius to 8 linear miles. Daily briefings were sterile, led by Incident Commander Latier Morales under ICS standards: objectives, containment, documentation, preservation. Each evening at 1800 hours, her sister remained near base camp, writing notes that later appeared in family testimony. "Still think she'll walk out, same trail, headlight maybe." The Incident Command Post, established at Santiam Junction, now hosted 63 personnel. Operation boards displayed topographic overlays, colored pins marking completed search grids. Standard protocols maintained detailed accounting. Each sector cleared required dual verification, documented with timestamps and GPS coordinates. Nothing was left to memory or assumption. "We're conducting a Type 3 extended search," Morales explained during the media briefing. "Multiple operational periods, significant resource deployment." The clinical language masked the human intensity beneath. Field teams returned with soaked boots, exhaustion evident in slumped shoulders. They spoke quietly at meal stations, comparing terrain notes, adjusting search patterns. Oregon State Police contributed additional canine units trained for human remains detection, a standard escalation after 72 hours. Their deployment remained discreetly documented, separated from family briefings. The dual tracks of hope and preparation for worst outcomes ran parallel in the operational logs. Hannah met with a victim services coordinator who explained the process with careful neutrality. We maintain operations until we reach definitive findings. The ambiguity provided both comfort and deepening anxiety. Without conclusion, hope retained technical validity. Weather radar showed a clearing pattern approaching from the west. Search teams repositioned for improved visibility, establishing elevated observation points with high-powered optics. Field cameras deployed at trail junctions captured continuous footage, analysts reviewing for any human movement. The technical complexity expanded geometrically. Cell tower data extraction required judicial authorization, granted on day 4 as emergency procedure. The resulting ping map showed Elizabeth's phone traveling east along the intended route until 3:17 p.m. Friday, then ceasing all network contact. The file notation reads, terminal signal consistent with either power depletion, physical damage, or entrance into communications dead zone. Geological survey maps identified several ravines in the vicinity of the last signal, terrain features that could trap an injured hiker while blocking communication. These areas received heightened search priority, teams descending with technical rope systems. Each negative finding simultaneously eliminated possibilities and deepened the mystery. Local media covered the operation with increasing attention. The Bend Bulletin quoted search statistics. 27% of missing hikers are located within 1 mile of their intended route. Such numerical framing provided context but little comfort to those waiting at base camp. Hannah's presence became a fixture at the command post, quiet, watchful, increasingly hollow-eyed as sleep deprivation accumulated. Staff psychologists noted the pattern in situation reports. Family member exhibiting normal stress response, maintaining functionality through participation in information flow. By day 5, search teams had covered 91% of high-probability areas. The operational terminology shifted subtly in documentation. Subject became missing person. Probability analysis gained mathematical precision while losing human optimism. The method of search transforms hope into inventory, footprints, litter, voice echoes cataloged and dismissed. In Report Bundle C7, one entry reads only, tonal, whistle from ridge, unidentified source. June 17th, discovery of a collapsed campsite 2 miles northeast of trail marker 75. Contents matched general backpacking gear, tent poles, partial food cache. No identifiable personal effects initially. Later forensic screening revealed fragments of shipping labels from a Corvallis outdoor supply store, confirmed matches to Caldwell's purchase receipts. However, tent model differed from her registered equipment. An evidence log shows sterile commentary, partial correspondence, not confirmed personal property. Ranger photographs exhibit minor signs of human habitation. Disturbed pine needles, stove ash, with 2 unburnt energy bar wrappers. The campsite documentation filled 17 pages. Systematic grid photography, soil sampling for trace evidence, detailed inventory of every item. Field teams established a protective perimeter, processing the scene with forensic discipline. The log notes ambient conditions. Light precipitation 48 degrees, moderate wind from northwest. Evidence preservation measures implemented. Initial assessment focused on intentionality, whether the campsite represented emergency shelter or planned overnight stay. The collapsed configuration suggested hasty departure rather than weather damage. Tent stakes remained properly secured on 3 corners, the fourth pulled from saturated ground. A blue nylon cord stretched between 2 trees at standard bear bag height, though no suspended food container remained. Evidence technicians recovered a partial boot print preserved beneath the tent footprint. Protected from rainfall, it retained clear tread pattern matching Elizabeth's documented footwear. The preservation was documented as anomalous clarity given environmental conditions, suggesting recent site establishment. The energy bar wrappers underwent brand identification, Summit High Protein, Chocolate Peanut, matching purchases on Elizabeth's gas station receipt from June 12th. However, wrapper condition indicated exposure predating the precipitation cycle, complicating timeline analysis. Search teams expanded outward from the campsite in standard spiral pattern. Technical specialists examined surrounding tree trunks for climbing marks, depressions for fall indicators, ground disturbance for signs of struggle. The methodical documentation revealed nothing conclusive, neither confirming emergency nor suggesting intentional departure. Field Coordinator Michael Reeves noted in his report, "Site appears consistent with solo hiker pausing to assess conditions. No obvious distress indicators." The professional assessment maintained neutrality while acknowledging the inconclusiveness that increasingly characterized the operation. Hannah reviewed site photographs from a tent at base camp, shoulders rigid with tension. "The blue sleeping bag," she identified. "That's not hers. She uses a red one always." The discrepancy entered the evidence log as contradictory equipment identification, pending verification. By evening, laboratory analysis confirmed soil samples from the site contained no biological materials of concern. The technical finding provided limited relief while deepening the operational questions. If Elizabeth had stayed there, where had she gone after, and why? Search radius expanded to include potential routes leading from the campsite in all directions. Helicopter operations utilized infrared scanning during dusk hours. The thermal differential between human body temperature and cooling forest offering maximum detection opportunity. No heat signatures registered in the expanded zone. The day's operational summary concluded with clinical precision. Site of interest cataloged, evidence secured. No conclusive connection to subject established. Recommend continued standard search protocol. One camp mirrored another. Routine wilderness patterns camouflaged individual traces. Beneath the ash, searchers found an object half melted, corner of a blue plastic trail register sleeve. On June 20th, mainstream attention reached regional outlets. A KGW affiliate aired missing person coverage with official appeal footage provided by the family. Public response flooded hotlines, false leads multiplied by the hour. Investigators cross-referenced credible reports within departmental limitation. SR morale eroded gradually under scrutiny. Budget logs show operational fatigue after day 9. Morales memo excerpt. Public speculation, impeding physical search deployment. Redirect resources to confirmed grids only. Environmental conditions worsened. Steady drizzle, 45 degrees at midday. Trail surfaces unstable. The influx of media transformed the search's character. News vans with satellite uplinks parked at the trailhead, equipment protected under pop-up canopies. Reporters with handheld microphones conducted stand-ups against the backdrop of forest and search personnel. The visual framing, urgent voices against silent trees, created narrative tension absent from the methodical operation itself. Volunteer coordination became increasingly complex. The operational log notes: 27 untrained civilian volunteers self-deployed to northeastern sectors without command authorization. Search personnel diverted to safety monitoring, communication discipline deteriorated, radio channels filled with non-standard terminology and location descriptions. Hannah's interview aired during the evening news cycle, her face composed despite visible exhaustion. She knows these trails, the transcript reads. She studied the geology here for 3 years. Something unexpected happened. The statement's measured tone contrasted with the broadcast's urgent framing, creating documentary dissonance that characterized media coverage. Professional search teams maintained operational discipline despite increasing pressure. Grid documentation continued with scientific precision. Each sector cleared, each negative finding eliminating another possibility. The process remained methodical, while public attention demanded breakthrough. Weather systems continued moving through the search area, complicating both ground operations and evidence preservation. Field teams reported increased stream flow, trail erosion, and vegetation damage. Environmental changes progressively obscured whatever physical evidence might have existed. A deterioration meticulously documented in daily briefings. Sergeant Morales implemented information control protocols, consolidated media briefings, verified source tracking, message consistency across agencies. The standard procedure acknowledged how public narratives could influence both operational effectiveness and family experience. Her directive noted, maintain factual foundation, no speculation, on condition or location. Technical search assets rotated through deployment cycles, fresh personnel replacing those reaching fatigue thresholds. Budget allocation documents reveal the operation had already exceeded quarterly emergency response funding. County commissioners authorized continued expenditure under disaster protocols, a technical designation that acknowledged the search's expanded scope. Wilderness outfitters from 3 surrounding communities provided additional equipment: GPS units, satellite phones, technical climbing gear. The donations entered formal inventory, each piece logged and assigned. The community response maintained procedural integrity while expressing regional concern. By evening, search operations had covered over 120 miles of trail systems and adjacent terrain. The probability maps showed diminishing returns, each day's efforts covering smaller areas with decreasing likelihood of success. The statistical reality remained unspoken in family briefings. The weather forecast projected continued instability. A low-pressure system stalling over the Cascades, bringing persistent precipitation and reduced visibility. Field operations adapted accordingly, technical teams focusing on drainage systems where rising water might transport evidence. Hope, once visible on maps, now existed only on screens, frequency pings, coordinates without movement. Late that evening, radio traffic recorded faint SOS pulses on Channel 3 for 12 seconds before signal degradation. July 1st, more than 2 weeks post last sighting. 2 hikers from Salem, Mark Iverson and Dana Patel, reported finding improvised shelters near Old Fire Road, 15 miles west of original search area. They submitted GoPro footage to authorities showing hanging black plastic sheets, ground cleared, piles disguised by fern growth. Forensic access began July 3rd under joint jurisdiction of Lynn and Jefferson counties. Initial survey noted chemical odor consistent with fuel residue. A maintenance worker later recalled unusual tire tracks earlier in June, reported but dismissed due to recreational vehicle traffic. The GoPro footage, 27 minutes of shaky handheld recording, captured the hiker's discovery with unintentional documentation value. Their voices provide real-time reaction. "This doesn't look right," Patel says, the camera panning across disturbed undergrowth. "Someone's been clearing stuff." The lens captures black polyethylene sheeting stretched between trees, weighted with rocks along the edges. The material shows precise cutting rather than tearing, straight edges indicating tool use. Law enforcement response escalated immediately. The site coordinates placed it outside all previous search grids, beyond reasonable walking distance from Elizabeth's last known location. Sergeant Morales requested multi-agency support, her request citing possible criminal nexus to missing person case. The terminology shift marked critical transition from search operation to criminal investigation. Scene containment established a quarter-mile perimeter. Forensic technicians approached in full evidence protocols, Tyvek suits, booties, documentation cameras. The process transformed wilderness into crime scene, natural terrain into evidence field. Pine needles, soil samples, fiber collection, each element entered the investigative record with precise location data. The plastic sheeting, when processed, revealed partial fingerprints preserved in adhesive residue where duct tape had secured corners. Laboratory analysis found traces of petroleum-based chemicals on ground soil, consistent with camp fuel, but in quantities exceeding normal recreational use. Evidence logs detail systematic ground preparation beneath the shelter area, pine needles cleared, topsoil compressed, small drainage channels carved. A secondary site located 50 meters west contained scattered food packaging, primarily preserved meat products and energy supplements. Lot numbers from packaging remained visible, later traced to purchases at a convenience store in Sweet Home on June 10th, 2 days before Elizabeth's disappearance. The receipt record shows a cash transaction at 11:22 p.m. Local resident Julian Mercer, interviewed during canvassing, recalled seeing a light-colored van or panel truck on the fire access road sometime that second weekend in June. His statement notes, "Thought it was Forest Service at first, but no markings." The observation entered the timeline with qualified reliability, witness memory without documentation. Field teams expanded the site investigation to include surrounding terrain. Detection dogs alerted at multiple locations, though disturbed soil testing revealed no biological materials. Ground-penetrating radar identified several subsurface anomalies, later determined to be natural rock formations rather than excavation. Hannah Caldwell received briefing on the discovery with professional support present. The interview record documents her response. "I don't understand. She wouldn't go there. That's nowhere near her planned route." The cognitive dissonance between known plans and discovered evidence complicated both investigation and family processing. Wilderness becomes a cover not by expanse but by routine, structures unseen amid repetition. Under one tarp lay a human hair strand matching mitochondrial DNA to Elizabeth Caldwell. Excavation of the forest floor revealed entry to a shallow pit reinforced with plywood and lined with reflective insulation sheets. Inside, detectives recovered personal items: a GPS device registered to Caldwell, digital camera with cracked lens, and notepad pages containing incomplete coordinates. Forensic timestamp trace on the GPS unit's memory card, last recorded activity, June 14th, 12:28 p.m. Location 12 miles north of intended trail circuit. From investigative file, confinement evidence present, no visible struggle marks on exterior perimeter, area designed for concealment. The pit measured 7 feet by 5 feet, depth approximately 4 feet below grade. Construction showed intentional design, drainage channels carved into surrounding soil, ventilation ports fashioned from PVC piping extending horizontally through dirt walls. The plywood reinforcement comprised recycled shipping material, edges cut with precision. Reflective insulation created both thermal barrier and light reflection, maximizing limited illumination within the space. Evidence recovery proceeded in methodical layers. The GPS unit recovered from beneath a folded tarp contained intact battery charge, suggesting recent placement rather than abandonment. Digital forensics extracted location data showing movement patterns inconsistent with Elizabeth's planned route. Timestamp records indicated presence 12 miles northwest of her intended loop. The device's memory contained waypoint names unfamiliar to Elizabeth's known hiking history, coded designations like drop and hold point. Technical analysis later concluded these entries were not created with the unit's normal interface but transferred from an external source. The digital camera, a weather-resistant Olympus model matching Elizabeth's equipment, contained a memory card with physical damage. Recovery specialists extracted partial image files showing forest terrain and what appeared to be trail junction markers. The final recorded image, time-stamped June 13th, showed a partial boot print in mud, not matching Elizabeth's known footwear. Notebook pages recovered from the pit contained fragmentary writing in what document examiners confirmed as Elizabeth's handwriting. Entries included partial coordinates, time notations, and brief observations. Second water crossing looks different, and trail marker missing at junction. The final entry contained only "not right," underlined 3 times. Soil samples collected from the pit floor underwent comprehensive laboratory analysis. Results identified clothing fibers consistent with the jacket Elizabeth wore in last sighting documentation. Additional trace evidence included granular residue matching commercial sedatives, pharmaceutical compounds typically requiring prescription. Detective Marshall from Jefferson County Sheriff's Office documented the scene with clinical precision. The space shows evidence of prepared confinement. Construction predates current occupancy. Multiple usage indicators suggest established pattern rather than opportunistic creation. When Hannah viewed photographs of the recovered items, she confirmed ownership with quiet certainty. The camera has a scratch on the viewfinder from when she dropped it last year. The interview transcript notes, "That's definitely hers." The personal verification shifted the case irrevocably from missing person to criminal investigation. Field teams expanded search parameters based on the new evidence, concentrating on access routes to the pit location. Tire impression casting revealed track patterns matching light trucks or vans, multiple sets suggesting repeated visitation. Forensic dating placed the most recent impressions within the previous week. Despite 2 weeks passing since Elizabeth's disappearance, the shift from wilderness accident to human intent reframed every previous search map. Not terrain failure, but directed misdirection. Behind the plywood wall, investigators found hand-scrawled letters. "Stay quiet. Daylight soon." Following forensic cross-checks, fingerprints lifted from aluminum can fragments matched known offender Eric Dean Rourke, previously arrested in 2011 for illegal encampment and assault near Sweet Home. Background pattern indicated transitory residency along logging zones. Rourke's last known vehicle, a beige Ford Econoline, registered expired tags in May 2015. Behavioral profilers consulted through FBI's BAU division noted consistencies with territorial isolationism, off-grid occupation control environments, and prolonged victim control through deprivation cycles. Criminal history databases flagged Rourke, 41, with prior arrests spanning 3 states. His pattern showed escalation: trespassing charges in Wyoming, 2007, harassment complaint in Idaho, 2009, aggravated assault in Oregon, 2011. Court records documented a psychological evaluation following his Sweet Home arrest, with the examining clinician noting territorial fixation with wilderness spaces and elaborate justification systems for claiming public lands. The case file contained employment history showing transient work, seasonal fire crew in Idaho, temporary logging operation in Washington, trail maintenance contract in Oregon's Willamette National Forest. Each position placed him in remote locations with minimal supervision and significant terrain knowledge. Vehicle registration records tracked the Ford Econoline through multiple renewals, the most recent expiring in May. Highway Patrol. Highway databases returned 2 citations in the previous year: improper lane usage near Sisters, Oregon, and expired registration warning in Eugene. Both incidents placed Rourke within the operational region surrounding Elizabeth's disappearance. Evidence technicians processed the aluminum can fragments with enhanced protocols. Beyond fingerprints, they recovered partial saliva DNA matching Rourke's profile in the National Offender Database. Date estimation placed consumption within days of the excavation discovery, suggesting continued visitation to the site after Elizabeth's disappearance. Detective Carson from Oregon State Police, Major Crimes Division, compiled the threat assessment. Subject demonstrates predatory pattern focused on territorial control rather than opportunistic violence. Planning indicators suggest sustained observation of victim movements prior to interaction. Surveillance operations established around the pit site recorded no return visits. Technical teams installed concealed monitoring equipment with satellite uplink, motion detection, infrared imaging, audio capture. The deployment transformed wilderness into technical observation post, inverting the previous power dynamic. Forensic analysis of site materials yielded construction timeline estimates. Wood preservative degradation patterns suggested the structure predated Elizabeth's disappearance by at least 6 months, evidence of premeditation rather than spontaneous action. Similar structures may have existed elsewhere in the region, undetected among vast wilderness acreage. The behavioral analysis report detailed psychological patterns. Subject demonstrates surveillance comfort, environmental adaptation, and victim selection based on isolation opportunity rather than personal characteristics. The clinical assessment characterized Rourke as predator rather than opportunist, territory defender rather than chance attacker. Hannah received the identification briefing with victim advocate support. The interview transcript captures her reaction. "I don't know that name. Why would he?" The question remained unanswerable within investigative parameters. Motive emerged from pattern, not logical connection. Crime in wilderness thrives where oversight dissolves. In such silence, procedural steps become the only language left. Subsequent statement by a local drifter: "He said she wasn't supposed to scream." Items processed July 9th. A dictaphone containing fragmented audio recorded between June 15th and June 21st. Voice identified as Caldwell's, hoarse, restrained, describing light patterns and waiting. No direct reference to captor. Specialist analysis extracted ambient sound, dripping condensation, occasional chain scrape, wildlife muted. Forensic psychologist Dr. Marisa Levin interpreted tone shifts as adaptive self-regulation under captivity, a clinical survival mechanism. The tapes provided no timeline beyond 6th day post-disappearance. The digital Recorder standard consumer model with external microphone capability contained 27 minutes of usable audio across multiple recording sessions. Technical analysis showed battery conservation, short bursts rather than continuous documentation. The preservation strategy suggested deliberate resource management by Elizabeth. Audio cleaning technology filtered environmental noise, isolating her voice from background sounds. The first recording, timestamped June 15th, captures measured breathing, then whispered inventory. Daylight visible through east corner. Water condensation from morning dew. Temperature dropping after sunset. The clinical observation mimicked scientific field notes. Elizabeth creating structure amid confinement. Later segments demonstrate shifting strategy. June 17th recording includes self-directed conversation. Stay focused, count steps, remember landmarks. Psychological analysis identified these as memory reinforcement techniques, attempts to maintain cognitive orientation despite sensory limitation. The final recoverable audio, dated June 21st, contains environmental documentation. Rain on plastic above, runoff channel working, no flooding. The practical assessment suggests adaptation to circumstances, problem-solving focus rather than emotional response. Throughout recordings, Elizabeth never directly names her captor or situation. Dr. Levin's report notes, subject demonstrates protective dissociation, maintaining observational distance from traumatic circumstances. The scientific framework represents psychological self-preservation. Ambient sounds captured between speech segments provided investigative value. Technical analysis isolated metal-on-metal contact consistent with chain links, water dripping at regular intervals, suggesting intentional collection system, and muted wildlife sounds indicating above-ground location despite being contained within an enclosed space. Acoustic specialists mapped sound reflections to estimate containment dimensions. Their analysis confirmed space approximately matching the excavated pit, suggesting the recordings were made during confinement at the discovered location. When Hannah listened to selected, prepared segments, she confirmed voice identification with certainty. The interview record notes her response. That's her scientific voice. She uses that tone when she's documenting field observations. The recognition provided verification while revealing how Elizabeth had adapted known behaviors to unknown circumstances. Forensic technicians examined the recorder's exterior for trace evidence. Results identified soil particulates, matching the pit location, partial fingerprints, confirmed as Elizabeth's, and microscopic fiber transfers from clothing, matching her last known outfit. The physical evidence connected the device directly to the confinement site. Most significant for investigative purposes, the recordings confirmed Elizabeth remained alive at least until June 21st, 6 days after her last verified sighting and 9 days before the pit's discovery. The timeline extension complicated search assessments while providing critical intelligence for ongoing investigation. Where no image remains, the voice becomes both wound and artifact. Final audible line, if found, don't come here. Between July 12th and 14th, multi-agency coordination produced suspect interception. Using drone-assisted thermal imagery, tactical units located makeshift shelter near abandoned ranger service structure on Mackenzie Tributary. Entry executed at dawn. Suspect Rourke surrendered without resistance. Inside, investigators found additional restraints, notebooks containing fragmented observation logs on hikers, each entry annotated by date, trail name, and subjective commentary, suggesting premeditated targeting. When asked motive, he replied, "It's about belonging." The tactical operation involved 28 personnel from 4 agencies: Oregon State Police, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, FBI Regional Support, and Forest Service law enforcement. Operational planning utilized satellite imagery overlaid with terrain mapping, identifying approach routes that minimized detection possibility. Drone surveillance established pattern of life documentation, confirming Rourke's presence at the shelter, tracking movement routines, and identifying security measures. Thermal imagery captured through overhead sweeps showed regular occupancy with single heat signature. The technical evidence provided both location confirmation and occupancy verification before physical approach. The shelter, constructed against an abandoned fire lookout foundation, utilized both natural rock formation and improvised materials. Similar to the pit structure, it incorporated insulation panels, oriented plywood, and waterproofing elements. Technical documentation noted consistent construction methodology between both locations. Entry teams approached under pre-dawn conditions, reduced visibility balanced against tactical advantage. Operation logs record ambient temperature 41 degrees, light ground fog, wind minimal. Approach utilized natural sound masking, a nearby stream providing audio cover for movement. Rourke's surrender occurred without incident. Arrest documentation describes him as compliant, non-responsive to commands but not resistant. He spoke only when directly questioned, offering minimal verbal engagement. Physical condition assessment noted adequate nutrition, no acute medical concerns, contrasting with whatever conditions Elizabeth may have experienced. Evidence recovery from the shelter yielded significant investigative material. Notebooks contained methodical entries dating back 18 months, each documenting hiker observations along multiple trail systems. Entries included descriptions, movement patterns, equipment carried, and whether subjects hiked alone. The records revealed systematic surveillance preceding action. Most critically, investigators recovered Elizabeth's driver's license, cell phone with battery removed, and hiking boots, definitive evidence connecting Rourke directly to her disappearance. Technical analysis of the phone later revealed intentional disabling after the last signal capture on June 12th. The device manually powered down rather than battery depleted. During initial questioning, Rourke displayed what the interviewing agent described as detached precision regarding his actions. When asked about Elizabeth, he referred to her only as the geologist and spoke about her as if describing a natural phenomenon rather than a person. The interview transcript includes his statement. She was studying the wrong patterns. I showed her the right ones. Restraint equipment recovered from the shelter matched marks documented on the pit structure, evidence of transport between locations. Timeline analysis suggested a pattern of movement between multiple sites, indicating greater complexity than initially understood. Justice in documentation feels less like closure, more like containment of information of damage. Among confiscated belongings, Caldwell's original laminated map, folded open to the same trailhead where she signed in. Arraignment held September 4th, 2015, Eugene District Court. Charges included unlawful confinement, homicide, and desecration of remains. Rourke's mental evaluation diagnosed delusional isolation subtype. Case proceedings lasted 26 months. Courtroom transcript excerpt. Prosecutor: You prepared these locations in advance? Rourke: The forest prepared them. Prosecution introduced forensic alignment between soil recovered from his tools and site contamination around the pit structure. Hannah Caldwell testified briefly, describing her sister's careful planning and fearlessness. Her presence remained composed, muted, procedural. Court documentation spans 3,000 pages. Motions, evaluations, evidence inventories. The clinical volume contains Elizabeth reduced to reference points: victim, deceased, subject. Legal language transformed lived experience into procedural elements. Psychological assessment described Rourke's worldview as territoriality expressed through predation. A distorted belief system where certain humans belonged to wilderness spaces while others represented intrusion. His selection criteria targeted those displaying scientific or documentary behavior, individuals who categorized natural spaces rather than inhabiting them. Evidence presentation methodically reconstructed Elizabeth's final days through forensic timeline. Cell phone data, witness sightings, physical evidence, and recovered recordings created a fragmented narrative, precise in documentation, yet incomplete in human experience. The court record captures methodology but cannot contain meaning. Hannah's testimony occupied only 12 minutes of court time. The transcript shows minimal elaboration beyond factual confirmation. Her composed delivery maintained Elizabeth as person rather than case element, a presence existing beyond documentation. Trials stabilize chaos into evidence, but meaning never restores through verdict. Court record ends with judicial notation. Sentence: life imprisonment without parole. In summer 2017, a ranger trainee placed a new metal sign at Santiam Pass trailhead. For Elizabeth Caldwell, sign in, sign out. The register now laminated against weather, ink dry from repeated review. Visitors still note her name printed faint beneath fresh signatures. Environmental technicians have since integrated localized tracking beacons for solo permits. Search operations cite this case as catalyst for Procedural Amendment 19A. The forest remains tranquil, wind through pine, gravel muted by moss. Yet every system log in region archives still lists her GPS coordinate set E14 to E15 as anomalous, do not redeploy. The procedural changes extended beyond signage. Search protocol documents now include Caldwell parameters for cases involving solo hikers with unexplained deviation from established routes. The technical adaptation acknowledges how wilderness investigation requires different methodology than urban missing persons. Hannah established a geology scholarship in Elizabeth's name at Oregon State University, funding field research with mandatory safety protocols. The application requires team documentation training and emergency communication planning. The memorial creates structure where loss occurred without structure. Forest Service Ranger training now includes case study examination, teaching personnel to recognize normal recreation patterns versus potential predatory preparation. The educational component transforms one documented tragedy into institutional knowledge without sensationalizing the circumstances. Trail system maps throughout the region incorporated emergency coordinate references, standardized location markers designed for quick communication during distress. The system originated directly from search coordinator recommendations in Elizabeth's case review. When the revised trail register installation occurred, Hannah attended without formal ceremony. Ranger notes describe her walking the first quarter mile of trail alone, then returning to sign the new register. The administrative record shows only family closure visit, no further action required. Even with reforms, certain absences cannot be recovered, only administratively remembered. In the last still frame of footage, dawn light crosses the same trail register line where her hand once pressed. Pen impression remains visible. Visitor footage shot years later captures the same trailhead, unchanged canopy, same gravel path. A faint etching lingers on wood, initials barely legible beneath sun bleaching. The microphone records wind and one indistinct voice murmuring, "Don't go back." The camera shuts down without timestamp.